Okay, everyone, settle down. Got a lot to get through today. It's Thursday, the morning briefing from the Celtic Way. I'm Hamish. Ryan is with me as well. Yesterday was a wild one, Ryan. We had two breaking stories, and they're actually going to be probably the main stories we chat about today as well, even though there are a few other things happening. So get ready. I guess it's been a weird old 24 hours, but it's been frantic.
It's been frantic. It's been exciting in some ways. It's been a bit scary in other ways. But no, I think I'm going to enjoy the last 8 days of this transfer window, regardless of what it is, because it's been a quiet one up to now. There's been sagas with Bernardo, sagas with Ademida, but those have all been, one at a time. Almost now, everything seems to be coming. Yeah. We knew about these players before, but these are new players that I can actually go and have a look at and have a scout at as well. So that's exciting. Players leaving the club, players entering the club. It's going to be a frantic last 8 days, and I just hope that Celtic come out of the other side, stronger or strong, depending on who they target and identify and capture.
How are we, everyone? Lovely to have you all with us. Some familiar names, some fresh names. Since it's going to be a busy one. So just let me know, first of all, how you're feeling about things generally at the moment. Listen, the Kyogo stuff is the obvious stuff. It's what people are talking about at the moment. That was a story that broke as we were on yesterday, Ryan. We've had time to go away and think about things a wee bit and learn about things and maybe make sense of why the current official best team in the world, FIFA Club World Champions, are after our main striker, because it was a bit of a weird shock at first, but I think there's a bit of reasoning behind it as well. So what's your thinking on this at the moment?
I'm more calm than I was yesterday when I first heard the news. When you see Fabrizio Romano, Sam Lee of The Athletic as well as some other sources speculating that Kyogo might be interesting Manchester City, then you're automatically going to panic mode and being like, oh, who are Celtic going to bring in to replace him? How are they going to manage this and deal with it? The more you think about it, the more you realise that this is a move that could make sense for Kyogo to Manchester City. He did work under Pep's assistant at Vissel Kobe from 2018 to 2019. Juanma Lillo. Yeah, so he did work under him, so he's probably already on the short list of players who can take up that role that Julian Alvarez has left when he went to Atletico Madrid for £82 million. That's an incredible fee for a player that was playing maybe once every 2 games for Manchester City, but they still managed to get £82 million. I'm calmer than what I was yesterday, but if this does come to transpire, then Celtic are going to need to get a move on and bring in somebody to replace Kyogo, and the same ilk of Kyogo as well. I think you've got that one sort of focal point in Ademida that's a bit of a rough diamond, I would say, and he still needs plenty of development in his game, but the talent's there. I think what we also need is an agile striker that can play the way Kyogo can if Kyogo leaves. Now, that's not to say that he will definitely leave, but there's no smoke without fire on these things, and if an offer does come in, Celtic's resolve will be tested by Manchester City for sure, and Kyogo will be tested, not least due to the fact that he changed agencies too. So yeah, it's one that we're just going to have to keep an eye on, but I'm a lot calmer about it than what I was yesterday, and what will be. 29 years old, if Celtic get a bid of 15 to 20 million, they're going to take it, unfortunately, because it's the last chance that they've got to cash in on a player.
The talk is, there was a report last night saying that 20 million is what we want. That was the fee I actually mentioned just off the cuff yesterday. I said, you would yeah, it's there is no argument for me over that being a good price for Kyogo. 29 years old. Listen, we have had £20 million paid for one of our players 2 times in our history. It's going to go up to 3 in the coming days with Matt O'Reilly moving on. And by the way, side point, no one's talking about Matt O'Reilly anymore. It's kind of strange, isn't it? But the point I'm making is, £20 million for a 29-year-old is obviously a good transfer fee for the club. My point is, at what point does the ambitions of the club and us as supporters, and bear in mind we're the ones who put all this money into the club more than virtually any club around the world, at what point does that become more important than the money on offer? Now, I know it might not be as simplistic as that, certainly not as simplistic as that. Kyogo, the chat is Kyogo would want to go, and that's not a huge surprise to anyone, even if he was going, which he would be, to be second choice striker, not get a hell of a lot of game time. It's still one of the top three best teams in world football at the moment, unarguably. And you've also got the financial element for Kyogo as well. He would be probably tripling his wage that he gets at the moment. So, and what would happen if we stood in the way of Kyogo getting that dream move? Do we obviously have to look out for ourselves? Do we have almost a duty to Kyogo in a way, just to say, on you go, net is this money? What would happen if we didn't allow him to do it? Would that affect Kyogo in the future at Celtic at all? Basically, the point I'm making is there's a hell of a lot going on to do with this. It's a really kind of complex issue, and it will come down to whether Manchester City want to offer that money and really, as you say, test our resolve. I think if they offered 20 million, I think Celtic probably would accept. Whether that's where that leaves us at that point, if Kyogo was to move on, I don't really know. He's a hell of a player to have to try and replace at the best of times, never mind a week to go of the window, when you've got like 3 other positions needing replaced as well, or bought in. It is just speculation though as well at the moment, Ryan. That is the thing. Like, the suggestion is that Man City have whittled it down to 2 players, Kyogo and a younger player. They might go for the younger player. They might just find out that Celtic don't want to sell Kyogo. Man City might not want to spend the kind of money we want for Kyogo, because from what I'm hearing and reading, they want a relatively cheap player coming in. For all the money that Man City have, they don't actually want to spend big money on a player who's going to spend more time sitting on the bench than actually being on the pitch. So I don't think in any way this is an absolute certainty that Kyogo's going to leave. I still think there's a lot of things to be sorted out.
Yeah, it'd be a changing dynamic for Manchester City, because they like to operate under the 2 strikers, one of them being maybe that main striker like Aguero or Haaland, and the other one being that backup striker, younger, that can come through and develop, such as Gabriel Jesus and Julian Alvarez. The past 2 strikers have been younger when they've came into the club from Brazil and Argentina respectively. So that would be a change-up if they were bringing in an older striker to play that second choice. And it maybe gives you some hope that Kyogo would stay at the club, because they would continue to go down that path of finding somebody from, like a Palmeiras or a Boca Juniors or a River Plate, a young striker coming through that has quality and has potential, but he's just coming off the bench for the final 20 minutes, 10 minutes in games. Sometimes they even throw 2 up top if they need a goal. Not that Man City need a goal very often with the amount of goal scorers they've got in their team, but if the deal comes in and the deal is made, or an offer is made, then Kyogo will go to Manchester City. I think he'd be silly if he didn't, to be honest with you. It's an amazing chance for him. And this isn't me selling him away or wanting him to go away. It's Manchester City. They're either number 1 or number 2 in the best club sides in the world at this moment in time. You can pick and choose between Real Madrid and Manchester City as to who the best team in the world are, but it's one of those 2. So the opportunity to get that, even if it's fleeting appearances for Manchester City, would be an incredible move for him. Not just on the park, but off the park financially as well. You've got his shoulder to take into account. How much is that going to impact his game going forward? This is his last opportunity to make that big move. And once again, I just want to reiterate that I'm not trying to sell the player or anything like that. I just think, looking at the optics for the player, that would be a move that he would probably jump at.
There's no debate over that, mate. I don't think there's any debate. No. Like if we accept a bid from Manchester City, Kyogo will be away. There's no way that he wouldn't take that offer. So,
no, I'd love to see him stay. I think every single Celtic supporter would love him to stay. I don't think that's anything unusual. But you've got to be realistic about these things too. Hopefully he stays. It'd be better for squad morale and everybody playing, because there's already new players apparently coming in the door in the next week or so, or you'd think that that's close to happening. So, you know, having less players to integrate is always better. Having players that are already there at the club that have acclimatised is better. But Celtic may be pushed into making moves with this latest development. I hope that's not the case, but these big clubs come calling. It's very difficult to deny them what they want, especially with the financial power and the lure that they've got for players.
Yeah, we'll wait and see. I mean, a few people point out I said that it was a cheap move or whatever for Man City. People saying 20 million is cheap for Man City. Yeah, totally. I mean, we're dealing with different kind of different worlds really, from Celtic to Manchester City. The amount of money they pay. I was listening to the guy Sam Lee. He was in Clyde Super Scoreboard last night, and he was talking about City, and they only paid £15 million for Julian Alvarez. They only paid £15 million for Manuel Akanji, and that's the kind of signing that City are looking for right now. They want a player who can come in as their second choice, who they don't have to pay a lot of money for, who's good enough to play for Man City, which I guess, by the way, is a huge compliment to Kyogo, regardless of what happens here. The fact that Man City have identified Kyogo as a player they feel good enough to play for Man City, it shows what a hell of a player we have. I having said all I've said, I still think Kyogo will stay at Celtic. That's my feeling. But it will come down to whether how keen Man City are on him and whether they actually think we're going to move for him. And that's the kind of difficult bit here, I guess, for a lot of us, as it's a wee bit out with our control. As much as people might just look at it and go, yeah, just reject any bid. He's not for sale. We know that every Celtic player has a price. My question again would be, at what point does that statement have caveats? At what point do you look at the overall situation and think, look, we're about to go into a Champions League campaign. I mean, the draw for the Champions League is next week, so we're really getting to this new Champions League campaign. And if we're to lose O'Reilly and Kyogo, it would kind of put us in a pretty bad place. At what point do you turn down the money almost and put the ambitions of Brendan Rodgers and the club and the fans and finally try to do something at European level ahead of that money? Listen, that's a fan's point of view. That's a fan speaking right there. The reality is that we know that this Celtic board don't really think like fans, and I guess that's the worry there. What's your kind of sense? How do you think this is going to play out?
I think there's two factors. There's Manchester City and there's Kyogo, because I don't think Celtic have a whole lot of power here, because if that money's offered to Kyogo, if personal terms are offered, and we all know that personal terms are kind of offered before a deal's even made, it's kind of like an unwritten rule in football, or an unspoken about rule in football, that personal terms will be agreed between the parties before sometimes even contacts made between the two teams. If Kyogo is offered that money, then I think he'll make it clear that he wants to make that move to Celtic, make that move from Celtic to Manchester City. If that's the case, I'm not saying that Kyogo's one of these players that would unsettle the dressing room, far from it, but this would be a move that he would want to pursue if Manchester City come calling. And then the fee is secondary. I know they need to agree a fee, but Manchester City are in that unique situation where they can offer enough, like pretty much off the bat, for what if Celtic have an asking price, then you would expect Manchester City, given the good relationship between the two clubs and their financial situation, which is endless, you'd expect them to hit the target pretty fast. I wouldn't expect it to be the same sort of negotiations that you're seeing at the moment from the likes of Atalanta, Brighton for Matt O'Reilly, although they seem to be progressing even further with the stuff on O'Reilly. If the deal was to get... I just feel like if this deal is going to happen, then it will happen, unfortunately. And I hate to have a defeatist attitude about it, but if Manchester City come calling, I do expect Kyogo to leave, and then you're in a frantic search for his replacement. Who do you go for? That's the question. Do you go back in for Kvistgaard? I can't even say his name anymore. I used to say it all the time, and I can't even say his name. Kvistgaard, who is banging in the goals right now at Brøndby. It's an interesting one, but it's one that I would like to be resolved quickly, because the further this goes down the line, the more worried you are that Celtic won't have enough time to bring in an ample replacement for Kyogo if it does happen. Hopefully he stays, But I'm aware of the dangers that Manchester City have at their disposal and the pool that they've got, especially for foreign players.
Just thinking out loud there when you mentioned Matt O'Reilly, I wonder if there's any... We get the impression the O'Reilly stuff's pretty far down the line, so this might be a moot point, but I wonder if there's any point you would get to where... I think we all feel that it might end up happening, but we feel we can't afford to lose O'Reilly and Kyogo, probably our two best attackers, in the same window within a few days of each other. I wonder if you reach a point where you maybe look at the Kyogo stuff. He's been at the club a little bit longer than O'Reilly, similar kind of money potentially we're talking about. We don't know how much City haven't offered anything yet. We don't know if they will offer, we don't know how much they will offer, but say they were to offer around 20 million, would you potentially look at the O'Reilly stuff and say, right, Matt, I know we kind of said that you were going to move on and all that stuff, we can't afford to lose Kyogo and yourself during this same window, so we'll allow Kyogo to go. Your offer will still be there in a year's time. Chances are that Kyogo's offer wouldn't be. Is that kind of thing you look at? I'm just thinking out loud. It probably won't work like that. I want to go through a few comments. Mark saying, Hamish, you're talking as if we have no chance of signing anyone. As I've said, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes with Brendan. If Kyogo gets the offer, he will 100% go. So where's the loyalty there? He will move on, and so do we. I mean, we're going to move on. If Kyogo does leave, obviously we're going to move on. My issue is I don't have faith in Celtic being able to replace Kyogo, our most outstanding player of the last 3 years, the best striker we've had since Henrik Larsson for me, given what he's done. I don't have faith in the club being able to replace him over the next 7 days. If I did have faith in that, and I know Adam Ida's there, and I know Dyson Maida's look good at the weekend, but if I had more faith in the club replacing players, then I'd be kind of more of a fan of this. But I don't think it's possible for the club genuinely to replace Kyogo in a week. I don't feel we're capable of replacing what he's brought us if he does go.
The conveyor belt is working one way with transfers and not so much maybe with other players, or there isn't that trust on the other side of things with players being replaced. There was a lot of talk about Starfelt not being replaced, or he wasn't replaced sufficiently. And there'd always be a worry because Starfelt, it's a centre-back. You can get in a player that defends, and Scales did that admirably. But a striker, their main resume or their main target is scoring goals, and not every player can do that or do that to the effect of Kyogo. It's not just the amount of goals that he scores, but the games in which Kyogo scores as well. Stepping up against Rangers, stepping up in the Champions League. Admittedly, it's probably those Champions League goals that he scored that has alerted Man City, and his performance against Man City in pre-season. Those two factors would have got Pep Guardiola and his team's attention for the player as to how he can play. I thought the link yesterday was quite interesting, the way they called him a winger. I think he's only played there once or twice in the past 3 years, which was interesting.
His wires crossed.
Yeah. He's definitely a striker, so he'd be playing as a striker if he went there. I don't think he has really the width to be playing as a wide player, especially in a Pep Guardiola team where they've got the likes of Jack Grealish, Salvinho, etc. So, I feel like we've spoken about Kyogo all the time on this podcast so far, but I hope he stays, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes. It's one of these ones that we're going to have to keep an eye on the next 7 or 8 days. And hopefully, if it is to be done, it's done fairly quickly. And if not, he stays settled, because it's going to be a big season for him, regardless of where he's playing, either at Man City or Celtic. He'll be expected to win the league at either side that he's playing for this season. So I'm hoping it's the former, not the latter, to be honest.
Yeah, hopefully City don't end up moving for him. Hopefully they go for someone else. Sam saying, if we block his dream move, why would other players want to join us to progress their career? That was the other thing I thought about earlier. It's actually quite a good thing Celtic selling players in general to Manchester City, because it proves to future potential Celtic players that they can come to Celtic and forget about Brighton and teams like that. You can go right to some of the best teams in the world. But obviously the situation with Kyogo at the moment, as I've outlined over the past 20 minutes, suggests why I don't think he should be sold. Jack saying, do you think we should stand in the way of Kyogo guaranteeing himself a Premier League medal, possibly a Champions League one, massively increasing his wages? I think Celtic will do what's best for Celtic. rather than Kyogo. Daniel bringing up a point a few people have said should be trying to get a younger player from them. It's worked before. It's worked a few times. Patrick Roberts, Jeremy Frimpong, Jason
could have been Oscar
Denayer.
Bob as well, Jan Koto. These are two players that were linked recently that have had big careers recently.
We've got a connection with them, so I wonder if something happens, if that would be part of it. Listen, I want to leave the Kyogo chat at the moment for now, because we're maybe on the brink of a pretty major signing, Ryan, one of the most expensive signings in our history. Mateusz Bogusz, who's a 22-year-old Polish attacking midfielder, currently plays for LAFC, that's Los Angeles Football Club in the MLS. We spoke about this yesterday as well, briefly at the end, didn't he, because you brought him up. He scored overnight as well, Ryan. I don't know if that means he's up to 14 goals or if he was previously on 12. I've got 13 written down here. 13 goals, 5 assists in 24 MLS games. Pretty impressive numbers. He's about to be called up for Poland for the first time, the full team. And I think the chat is that this is a goer. Like, we're hearing from Polish media, we're hearing from Scottish media outlets that this is going to be happening. Basically, £8 million. The chat is we're going to fork out for Mateusz Bogusz.
Yeah, I don't really know his position, to be honest, because all of his goals.
He's been playing false 9 this season for LA.
That's interesting, which means he can drop back and play as an attacking midfielder. That should be an easier transition if he is to play there. But also looks like he can play out wide too. He's got enough about him to cut in. And the one player that he did remind me of with a couple of his goals, with the power of his shots cutting inside, was Yarmolenko, who plays for Dynamo Kiev, but he was playing for Borussia Dortmund, Kiev in the past as well, the Ukrainian international. Just his stature, because he looks taller as well. I do like the look of him. Looks like Celtic have been, actively searching for a replacement for Matt O'Reilly. I think they've known that Matt O'Reilly was going to be leaving the club in this window, even when the Atalanta sort of rumours or conversations died down. So this one seems to have some legs in it, and it seems to be quite far down the line. I did see some talk, and it was just rumours, paper talk potentially, that Celtic maybe couldn't get him until January, but that doesn't seem to be the case whatsoever. I think the player will be keen on the move to Celtic to play in the Champions League, and he seems to have a bit about him. 21 years old. Just because he plays in the MLS and he's 21 years old doesn't mean that he can't step up.
23 today.
23?
Today is his birthday. Seamus pointing out he's 22 yesterday, Ryan. 23 today.
Okay, I've got you. Still a young player. Matt O'Reilly's 23, so it's like for like in that department. Yeah, I think it's a player that could really excite the Celtic support, having a player that can shoot like that. Because Matt O'Reilly's got a good goal scoring record. He did last season. This guy seems to have even more about him in terms of goals. Can score from free kicks. Can score from can score from outside the box, inside the box. I just hope that this is in conjunction with Arne Engels, to be honest. I want the two in at the one time. Or Sanchez, if you can't get the Engels deal done. Brendan Rodgers has talked about the fact that they need two midfielders if Matt O'Reilly was to leave. And in some ways that could potentially strengthen the midfield, bringing in two players to distribute the qualities of Matt O'Reilly into two different areas. You bring in a defensive midfielder that can focus on that, be a playmaker from deep. Then you've got somebody that can score goals on the other side of the midfield. I'm quite excited about these players being linked with the club. I hope that both of them come. Maybe Sanchez if one of them doesn't materialise. But as it stands, Bogusz looks like it's pretty far down the line. I do expect this one to get finished in the next week or so, because it seems as if Celtic are willing to stump up the cash for the player. LAFC won't reject 8-9 million if it comes their way, I don't think, regardless of where they are in the MLS or other finances. And the player will want to do it as well. You've just seen that revolving door. You've got players wanting to leave for the next step, and then you've got other players wanting to come to Celtic because that can be their next step. As long as that machine is functioning properly, then Celtic can be very profitable in this area.
He seems to really be having a bit of had a bit of a breakthrough season, because you look at his record prior to that, he was at Leeds United for 4 years, didn't really ever make it through there into their first team. He's been in various loan spells, Ibiza, Logrones, He's been capped all the way through the Polish youth setup, but it seems like this year has been his real breakthrough, one at LAFC, and player on the rise, and the club probably feel now is the time just to move for him. And I mean, I always think it's exciting when you see a player right in form right now who have been linked with. I mean, the guy literally, for anyone, I don't know if I just mentioned it a few minutes ago, the guy literally scored overnight. He scored a really kind of nice outside of the box side footer into the corner, which seems to be his trademark. He scored overnight. This is a guy who's absolutely flying at the moment, and the chat is that we're going to sign him. So I'm really quite excited about this one. I agree with you. Engels as well. Engels seems to be a bit more defensive, so that's kind of all adding up there as well. I'm less sure on Alvin Sanchez. I'm not. I don't know. I need to look into more as the kind of the club he's coming from and all that kind of stuff suggests to me anyway that he wouldn't be of the same level immediately as someone like Engels or even Bogusz. So it's one worth keeping an eye on. We did get a comment in there. Sorry, it was just Seamus saying that he's 23 today. But yeah, I hope this one continues because he looks really good.
Yeah, fingers
Anything
crossed to get this over the line.
Yeah.
It does remind me a bit, and Joe, I was talking to Joe this morning, and he was saying that some of the stuff that he does on the pitch reminds him of if Tony Kroos was further up the pitch with the way that he goes about his business. Not comparing the two, just saying the similar play styles. Comfortable on the ball. He loves an assist as well. Some of his cutting assists to his teammates, they could really be helpful for Celtic, especially with what you're losing in Matt O'Reilly, because you lose the goals with Matt O'Reilly, but you also lose his assists and his creativity. So if you can plug that gap with somebody coming through the door that's round about the same age, that looks as if he's on the verge of breaking into that Poland team as well, you're catching him at the right time, you're signing him up at the complete right time, and he's only going to improve from there. I think this is astute business from Celtic if they can get this sorted.
Yeah. It's one to keep an eye on. As we say, it seems from what we're hearing like this is one that could move quite quickly. Right, Yuki Kobayashi has left. I don't think this has been officially confirmed by Celtic, but we've seen images or an image of him in the colours, black and white colours of Portimonense. So he's going to join them permanently as well, Ryan. 4-year deal. So we're rid of Kobayashi. That sounds horrible, but that's happening. The other chat that seems to be growing is Mikey Johnson heading to Burnley. Been a few different sources on this. I'm yet to see a totally reputable one, but certainly suggestion is that he's going to Burnley. So Yuki Kobayashi and Mikey Johnson could be out pretty soon.
It would make sense if it's Burnley, because Burnley have just sold one of their wingers to Tottenham, I believe. So they're looking for a replacement in that area. Why not bring in somebody that's used to the Championship, that really did come alive in the second half of last season? It may have just fallen onto their laps and been like, oh, look, this guy's still available. This guy was so good in the Championship last season. I know Burnley weren't there last season, but they would have kept tabs on players that were plying their trade at that level. So if there can be something agreed between the two sides, then brilliant. I think everybody will agree that Mikey Johnson's future lies elsewhere. He's tried his hardest to integrate back into the side. It didn't really go well for him last season, apart from a couple of goals at Dens Park, I believe he scored.
Yep.
So yeah, there was that. But yeah, I think his future does lie elsewhere, unfortunately. So I wish him all the best. Good to see him, like academy product, playing at a good level in the Championship potentially. Celtic will be getting a fee. As for Yuki Kobayashi, he was never going to make it in the Celtic squad, especially with Brendan Rodgers in charge. I think Brendan Rodgers made his mind up pretty early about the defender. He's had some game time in pre-season, but he was never really going to make it. It makes sense for Portimonense because Celtic had a couple of pre-season friendlies with them, or mid-season friendlies, so they'll have had a closer look at him in those. Yeah, I remember those games was it a couple of seasons ago? They were
last pre-season, a year ago.
So they would have had a good look at him then at that point and maybe kept tabs on him. This one makes sense for all parties. He stays in Europe, which is good for him as well. it's one of those ones where you don't want a player to immediately go back to Japan thinking that they've completely failed in their pursuit of European football. So the fact that they're going to Portugal, Kobayashi, means he's got that second chance at a good level too. So wish him all the best. Hopefully he does well.
Might suit him actually, less kind of physicality in Portugal. The people said 5 million for Mikey Johnson. Is that right? I would bite your hand off for 5 million for Mikey Johnson. I was thinking it'd be a couple of million he'd be away for. If we get 5 million for him, that's pretty.
I think it'll be somewhere in the middle because he's on the last year of his deal. I don't expect Burnley
2 years. No,
that is it 2 years? I thought it was only one.
A minute ago. I think it's up in 2026.
Okay, so maybe 5 million, round about that ballpark. Then
you might be right. I'm seeing different things. Yeah,
it's whether it's 1 year or 2 years, he's not one of Celtic's biggest assets, even though he did have a good second half of the season at West Brom. So if they get any sort of any money as a profit on Mikey Johnson, because he was an academy product, so there isn't that expectation or pressure to sell him for X amount of money. I think it's just the right move for him to move on, get his career going, because he's not a young player anymore. He has to be playing every single week now. He won't get that at Celtic. He might get that at Burnley under Scott Parker. So I guess as I watch this space, I hope he smashes it down there like he did at West Brom, especially in the first sort of half of his loan, and really makes a career for himself, because I don't want his career to be harmed. I want his international career to keep on going fruitfully. So if he keeps on going, then you know all the best to him. But it's for the best, and it's for the best for all parties concerned here that he does move on.
Derby County apparently keen on Gustav Lagerbielke. So that's one. I think he's close to joining Heerenveen. But if you talk about Lagerbielke going, Kobayashi's away, Mikey Johnson soon, we're kind of gradually getting there with the fringe players, moving them out. I think there's been a lot of good progress there. It's just about now adding the quality and keeping the quality at the club. It's going to be a really busy final week. I mean, it's unimaginable to me how busy it's going to be, given that we still hope is the key word here for, I don't know, 3 first team signings, potentially more.
Yeah, I think 3 if Kyogo stays and 4 if Kyogo goes would be the ideal amount. Obviously, there's some areas that you would take precedence over others, but if you can get 3 or 4 first team players, because I think every signing that Celtic have made so far this window, and that's the one encouragement for me in this transfer window, is that all of these players that came through the door are going to have an impact on the first team, barring maybe Sinisalo, but there's only one goalkeeper can play per game, so he can develop in the background and he can be a long-term project. Kasper Schmeichel, first team player. Paulo Bernardo will be a first team player. He'll be relied upon even more if Matt O'Reilly does go. He'll be relied upon to play 40-50 games this season. Adam Ida, first team player, could be first choice striker if Kyogo goes for a time. So all of these signings are targeted for the first team. There's no projects coming through apart from Sinisalo, which makes sense. I just hope that they keep and they continue to do this, because if they add another 3-4 first team players, then the squad's going to improve as a whole, and there's going to be real competition on the bench as well as in the starting lineup. You know, you could have players like Maeda, Bernardo, even Kuhn, although I think he's probably a starter now. You could have all these players vying for spots and then rotating in the bench and in the starting lineup. That can only be good for the success of the team moving forward, and having that strength and depth is going to be important. It's important to move those fringe players on. They don't necessarily have a future at Celtic, so to have new players coming in and instantly command first team spots will be brilliant to see if that happens.
Yep, let's hope so. No Alan, no real news on McCowan at this stage. No real news on Jeffrey Schlupp. No real news on Owen Beck. Darragh O'Shea. There's a number of names here. We kind of complained the whole window about not having names. I don't think we have that issue anymore. There are names galore. Alvin Sanchez and Arnie Engels. Mateusz Bogusz is the latest one. So let's just keep an eye. And yes, we certainly need a left back and centre back. I'm starting to worry about the centre back stuff. I've already been been doing that, Ryan.
All these attacking players feel like the squirrel to sort of look at in the distance, while Celtic don't do any business in the centre back and left back areas. They're still important. I hope that the club and the board and Brendan Rodgers won't have forgot. It's not on him. He'll have been making it abundantly clear that the club need a left back and a left centre back. So these are positions that have got to be strengthened in this window. We can't forget about them. As good as it is talking about attacking players, midfield players, they are the attractive signings to talk about. You need that grit at the back. You need another left back. You need a centre back. If you get those plus the midfield, I don't think anybody will be complaining about how good a window it was, despite how long it's taken for some players to get through the door. If they address all of these problem positions, or not problem positions, but positions that are in need of greater depth and greater quality. Quality is the big word there. So then I think nobody will be complaining about this window apart from the timing. But if they don't, then you'll get the usual. I think you'll get quite a bit of moaning from supporters about how those positions haven't been addressed, even though they've been standout positions for over a year now, you could say.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Ryan. I've enjoyed your thoughts today. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Mad numbers today, but I kind of thought it would be that way given what is going on at the moment. Keep it up. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. It means that you'll get alerted and stuff when we're live and stuff like that. That's all well and good. Tony will rejoin us tomorrow. We've got a small matter of a game this weekend as well that we've not even really had a chance to talk about, and it should be a pretty tough game, I think. So we can do that tomorrow and discuss whatever else is going on. Thanks everyone. Speak to you soon.